Ryan, great to see you.
Joe, great to be here.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Ryan. I appreciate it. Reese, great to see you as well.
Hey, it's good to see you again, Joe.
Yes, congratulations on the agreement, the M&A deal. I guess I'll start with Ryan in terms of how did Electric find Techvera? How did you guys come together here?
The story is almost a little hard to believe, but right after I started Electric in 2017, I was just scrolling through my feed on Facebook and I started seeing videos in my feed of some guy talking about IT. And I was like, that's weird. But I clicked, I listened to it. I was like, oh, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He runs an MSP. And then I looked, it turned out we actually had a bunch of mutual friends, some folks that Reese had gone to college with, I was friends with here in New York. And one thing led to another. And I don't know if Reese reached out to me or I reached out to him, but we ended up on a call and started talking about the future of the industry. And, 4.5 years later, here we are.
Yeah, I mean, how do you go from getting to know each other and comparing notes on the industry to, hey, you know what, maybe let's talk M&A. Now, to put it in context, I know Electric, you've done M&A before, you've done funding before, so you have experience here. And Reese, I apologize, I don't know if Techvera has ever done any M&A, but I'm wondering from your vantage point, how does it go from learning a little bit about Electric to maybe like, hey, maybe there's a connection here in terms of the two companies coming together. I'll start with Reese because I'm always interested in the seller side, and then we'll jump over to Ryan on the buy side.
Yeah. So Joe, our M&A experience had been limited, but we did acquire an MSP last year, bring them into our organization. And that was very good learning experience for us. And, being on the other side of the equation. And so to answer your original question, Joe, how do you get from those initial kind of emails, introductions to where we are today? And the answer is one word, and that is time. And so over those 4 years, we built a friendship. And, every couple of months, Ryan and I would check in and do phone calls and Zooms and, talk about our growth and trends that we're seeing in the industry. And, every time I came back, it was like, hey, I just landed, 50K in MRR, Ryan would be like, hey, we just added 2 million in our ARR, right? So It was really cool over those 4 years as we were growing. And during that time, Joe, I joined a peer group, got really serious about the business and started, really putting the financial and operations pieces front of mind for me. And so I was able to kind of show that track record of that growth and that health and improvement. And at the same time, got to see what Ryan and his team were doing and how quickly they were scaling. And so ultimately it came to, a boiling point where it was like, man, there's too many opportunities for us to come together.
Okay. So Reese, you mentioned that one deal that you did do. I want to go back to that. Was there anything special about the way you structured it? What was the approach there?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've always really advocated for is thinking outside the box. And so, when I looked at growth and I saw what the trending looked like on our organic growth and knew that we could grow further through some M&A activity, that was one realization. The other one was that there was no cash in the bank to fund that. And, just like every other MSP owner out there, we're inundated with calls from PE companies and emails. And that just didn't feel like the route for me. I'm very passionate about this industry. I'm not just looking to build the multipliers and exit. I am in the channel, man. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? And so, we were able to come to terms with that deal where we did an equity stake, right? I gave the company we acquired a small position in the parent company, and it was, sum of us two together is greater than the individual parts, and off we went. And so it was actually about a year, almost a year to the day of our M&A activity with Electric, coincidentally.
Fantastic. Ryan, from your vantage point, as I mentioned, you guys, you have a war chest, so to speak. I think you raised about 40 million earlier this year. Maybe it was perhaps late in 2020, give or take, in Series C financing. From your vantage point, when you have a war chest, you can have a lengthy list of acquisition targets. Why was Techvera the right target? And I mean target in a positive way, not take them out. Sure, I mean, bring them in and scale them.
Yeah, look, I think, in the MSP industry, there's a lot of these, private equity backed roll-ups, and those, great, right? Like, but it's largely financial engineering. What we're doing differently is we're building a lot of proprietary software. We're really trying to change the whole end customer experience of, create a modern software centric, easy to use, suite of software and services so that any business, any small business, can start their managed IT support journey some way or another, right? And so for us, doing M&A isn't the growth strategy. We've figured out how to build an inside sales team and just make a lot of phone calls and acquire new customers. So for us, M&A, I mean, it's a little bit about the growth, but really it has to do with finding companies that have a shared mindset and finding companies, most importantly, that have a complementary skill set. And so one of the things that Reese and I have talked a lot about is that, Electric's really good at sales and marketing. We're really good at developing software. But there's a lot of core MSP DNA that we actually don't have that we need to have if we want to make sure that we can continue to scale the quality of the user experience as we become a much, much larger company, right? And so Joe, you and I have talked about this in previous interviews. It seems a little counterintuitive for a company that's really trying to be a predominantly software business to go buy services companies. But if you think about it, you have a layer of best-in-class services on top of some really excellent software. That's a winning combination for the end customer. And so, to sort of the point that, Reese was making of just us knowing each other and checking in periodically, every few months we check in, I'd go, man, he told me he was going to do a bunch of things 3 months ago, and we check in 3 months later and he did all those things and then a few other things. And so I think that built a lot of trust, I think, on both sides over the years of hey, there's just a couple of guys that are ambitious that generally do what they say they're going to do. And that's usually where the great partnerships start.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm gonna show my age, but it almost reminds me of looking at a baseball card every other year, and it's wow, look at these batting averages going up, look at the home runs going up, and it's we should sign this guy. This is really good. So it makes sense to me. I understand that. Listen, I think one of the challenges for our readership and viewership is when you say MSP M&A, that could be 2 5-person companies coming together, or it could be a mid-market enterprise coming together. I want to give our viewers and listeners a feel for the scale. So Ryan, what's the update in terms of your overall head count, customer counts, number of endpoints under management? Where are you at this point?
We're close, I think about 35,000 endpoints under management, about 400 full-time employees all around the world. Customer count, I believe, is north of 600. So yeah, we'll end this year, mid 8 figures in annual recurring revenue. So yeah, pretty exciting. Considering we were, sub $1 million in revenue 4 years ago.
Yep. And then a question for Reese from your vantage point. Now you're based in Texas, correct? What city in Texas? Where are you?
So we're in Denton, Texas, North Texas area, about 30 minutes north of Dallas-Fort Worth here.
Okay, great. Is there a sweet spot for you in terms of vertical market or region, or are you more of a horizontal play and you're able to touch all those companies in that area?
One of the things that I think we've done here, Joe, that's been really effective in our growth is that we're pretty well balanced across a few key verticals. We do with a lot with legal, logistics, construction, manufacturing, a lot of professional services to CPAs, financial shops, that sort of stuff. So, definitely look for certain headcounts within that, but balanced across a few verticals. Obviously have a few that we know work really well in, maybe a few that we avoid as well. So a really balanced approach on that. I decided really early on, we didn't want to go all in on one industry, right? And I think, through 2020 and coming into this year, we were able to really reap the benefit of that, having clients that were really positioned to sustain 2020 and get through it and not be too impacted by all the things that were going on. So.
Got it. Excellent. So, hey, Ryan, one final question for you, and it's sort of a multi-parter. So part A would be, tell me a little bit about growing at all costs. And I'm not accusing you of that, but there are MSPs out there and private equity firms that are trying to grow at all costs versus what you're up to in terms of scaling the business responsibly. That would be part A. Part B is, tell our viewers and listeners a little more about the software strategy without revealing your secret sauce. Because I think a lot of MSPs out there that, they're leveraging off the shelf tools, but they're trying to figure out, can I develop my own intellectual property too? And what does that look like? So part A again is that sort of growing responsibly versus at all costs. And part B is the intellectual property play, what you're up to.
Yeah.
So thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, one of the best pieces of advice that I got from one of our major investors in the early days of the business was that growth is necessary, but quality is non-negotiable. Right? Quality for the end customer. Without that, there's really no point, right? And so, and I think when you play a role as important as the IT provider to these businesses, you can't mess that up. That's a huge responsibility. You're not going to get everything right with every single client 100% of the time. That's a given, but you have to aspire to getting everything right with every single client 100% of the time. And so, I think what we do every 3 to 6 months here is we look at the customer base and we ask hard questions and we say, hey, what shouldn't we be doing? Who shouldn't we be going after? Right. And I think, for us, we've resisted a lot of temptation to get pulled up market and to just start going after bigger deals and bigger dollars. We've resisted the temptation to just start signing up every onesie twosie that comes in off our website. I think from the beginning, we've stayed really true to a specific type of small business. And, for us, that tends to be companies anywhere from, 10 to 20 full-time employees on up to, maybe 150, 200 on the larger end. That gives us plenty to work with. There are a ton of companies that kind of fall in that size range. And so focus has been the biggest thing from a quality standpoint as we scale. And then
I was going to say, and then what about on the intellectual property side and sort of the software mindset? Do you think more and more MSPs will pursue it, or is it a tough nut to crack? I mean, how have you gone after it?
Look, it's really expensive, right? Like, software developers are not cheap. And so I think, the reason why I pursued the path of venture capital financing was we were able to find a group of investors that said, managed IT support is one of the largest but most overlooked industries out there. It's in need of disruption, right? In the sense that, look, there's a lot of great MSPs out there. There's also a lot that aren't great. And, the end customer is increasingly a younger digital native IT buyer who grew up with the internet, who wants tools and dashboards and self-service, all those other things. You're always going to need some services in there too. And so, we just really felt like now is the right time, or, almost 5 years ago when I started the company, no national brand existed. So we said, let's go create a really exciting, fresh, kind of younger looking national IT brand for small businesses. Let's reinvent that end customer experience by building some tools and dashboards and software that can put the power in their hands. Let's begin to automate a lot of the stuff that a support desk is doing so that the customer experience is better, but our economics are better. The trade-off, like, all that sounds really great. The trade-off is it's really expensive, right? So, we've raised over $100 million to date. And so, look, the opportunity we're going after, the MSP market is so big that even if 10 years from now, Electric's doing $1 billion in annual recurring revenue, we'll still be less than 1% of the market.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think the bottom line is at the end of the day, everything is going to wind up managed.
Yeah,
so the
totally
MSPs better step up to fill that gap. So, I wish you both well on the journey. And just a final thank you for your time, Ryan. I wanted to thank you for taking some time together.
Yeah, this was great as always.
And Reese, thank you for your time as well. I really appreciate it, and congratulations to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe. Anytime.